Well, hello, this is Pink Glue, and this is another day in California COVID Paradise. This is episode 152. It is October 30th, 2020. Halloween is almost here, and as we stated earlier on my son's podcast, his favorite holiday ever has always been Halloween. You know, as kids, we like to dress up, and I often asked, on one day it's really cool to wear underoos and to wear cool superhero costumes, but then you wake up one day and it's no longer cool, it's weird. What exactly is that age so we can tell people in advance? But anyways, having a younger one going through the thrills of costumes and masks, it just was, it's been such a thrill all these years to see it through another eyes until this year. He says, what, wear a mask? I've had to wear a mask all year. I don't even want to celebrate Halloween. I'll go in my real clothes. And then he realized there's nowhere to go. So he was brilliant. He was telling his friends that he's going trick-or-treating this year. And I asked him, well, where are you going to go? California won't allow it. And he says, oh, I'm going to need extra bowls, and I'm going to put them in front of all of the bedroom doors in our house. So all the way down the hallway, and at the other end of the house, there's some more bedrooms. And he's going to put bowls in front of every single one and go trick-or-treating. That's inventive. I'm just so proud of him for making the best out of this situation. So again, this is Pink Glue, episode 152. We're going to go through a variety of subjects. This is kind of a catch-up of current events. And at the very end, if you want to fast forward, there's also two references to YouTube stations that are really on the nose right now. So if you want to fast forward to those, but between here and now, we'll go over some current events to get us there. Okay, so let's just click on this first one here. The reason this is up, this is a district resource list. I went to drop off my son at school today, which I knew I was going to have a problem. And let me clarify by what I mean by school. The schools are still closed. Educating a child is horribly dangerous. I hope none of you are engaging in such bad behavior. However, learning pods are open, which means that the city has opened up places where the kids can go for the day. There's no teachers. They can bring their laptop and study any sort of a distance learning program that they're already enrolled in, but they can sit with other kids and they can play with other kids and they can laugh on their breaks and they can have fun as long as there's not a teacher there educating them. Again, a WTF is all I can give, but it's one making up rules after another. So yesterday he was not able to attend. The reason being, I was very fortunate to have a interview, and I was so grateful, but he can only be dropped off between a certain window of time, and that time is between 8 and 8:20, and we couldn't get there till after 8:30 once I finished my call because I couldn't drop him off before the 8 o'clock call. And so I go in to drop him off, and he's not allowed because he's outside that window. So he gets sent home. And then I'm informed that if a child misses one day, that they are also not allowed to return without a doctor's note. Well, they sure as hell know he wasn't sick because he showed up yesterday and was turned away. So then down the rabbit hole I go, and I'll make this as brief as possible, but for any of you parents dealing with the ridiculousness, so along with the wonderful furlough that hit me back in April, I also lost medical insurance. But because I had a good job, I didn't qualify for Obamacare or Medi-Cal. I had to get private insurance. But private insurance for somebody who's unemployed and had to wait over 6 months for unemployment to kick in was not an option, as food and shelter was a priority. And so we don't have medical insurance, which means that under California law, I have the privilege of paying, I think this year it's a 2% penalty for not having insurance in one of the most catastrophic years of my life, certainly. So I'm going to have to pay a penalty for not having it when I desperately would have loved to have had insurance, and in fact kept my job that the government wouldn't allow me to go to anymore. So I asked them, you know, if I want to abide by that, but where do you think I'm going to go to get a doctor's note? And they gave me an email of reference note. So with COVID, you can go get free testing. I said, well, testing is different than a doctor's note, and he clearly doesn't have COVID and has not been exposed to COVID. Thus, a test would be a waste of resources. But even if we took a test, they don't tell you on the spot. I think I don't even know at this point, the days have shrunk, but I would think there'd be at least 3 days before you hear back. So how many days of school does he need to miss? Well, there's no resources, there's no doctors, there's no medical insurance. I do have a right to pay $325 for a telemedicine appointment, and the first one available is a week out. So my child, because I had the pleasure of an interview, is not allowed to attend school for at least 1 week until I can continue to find some level of solution. But you see the ridiculousness of it. So I contact Gavin Newsom's office because he's the mastermind behind California. And their offices, you get a recorded message and says that due to COVID, their offices are closed. Please leave a message. Well, in 2 days, they haven't called back. I contacted the California Department of Health, I think it was. Same thing, offices are closed. Please leave a message, no call back. I contacted Santa Clara County Department of Health. There's 2 different numbers, one in my city and one in another city within the same county, same message. Nobody answers the phone. It's just, please go ahead and leave a message, no call back. So I go to the district offices, and this is what I get. And they tell me, I actually got someone to answer the phone. Oh, by the way, I also went to the mayor's office. No, nobody's there because of COVID. They're closed. I went to the senator's office. Nobody's there because they're closed. I went to the council members who are running for re-election right now. Nobody's there because they're closed because of COVID. So all these laws are getting enacted, and nobody is there to even answer questions or create solutions. They're just complete vacuum. So I went to the closest school district, and somebody answered there and told me that which is why I had that here, the parent student handbook has been updated for this year. So I open it. It's a 2021 Parent Student Handbook. We're going into COVID when they were writing this, so they fully knew to update it. And it says on page 18 is attendance. And I won't go through the whole thing, but when you get down to page 18, that clearly has the standard clause that if your child is out for 3 or more days, then you need a doctor's note. And that's been standard for a long time, and that's acceptable. But 10 minutes late isn't referenced, and 1 day missing does not. And so these are the most recent bylines that we have to go by for COVID. So once again, it looks like this learning pod is making up their own rules as they go along and creating unnecessary challenges, which we're seeing left and right in California. I won't even go into the depth of some of the other brilliant ideas they came up with. So in order to break up that conversation, I wanted to go to this one real fast for any of you who are in this area. Or if you own a car wash, here you go. So apparently they've done this for 3 years. This is the first I've heard about it. I think it's genius. San Jose Car Wash Tunnel of Terror. So here's to break up. What you do is you go through a car wash there. And here's a demo of what you look like when you come out the other side. Just kidding. But anyways, they open up their car wash. You go through, you actually get a car wash. They use a different color soap though, so they make it a really fun spray on the car. And then, but meanwhile, there's random people that jump out at you while you're in the car wash. And it's this time of year, I think that's funny. You would not be able to do that. Here's some other pictures of it. You wouldn't be able to do that though during the Gavin Newsom Thanksgiving feast with your family though, because if you scare people, they might scream or shout or even laugh or maybe even sing. And I understand all of those are out of the picture. But if you're in your own car with one household, apparently there's some good times. Let me go on to this next one here. This one I saw a few days ago. So let me see the date published on this one. This is Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And this was Sean P. Sullivan is the one who wrote it, published on October 29th. Oh, so this was yesterday. And I just was floored when I saw this in the middle of everything else. Sanford, Maine, 3 students received flu shots at school even though their parents had not consented to vaccinations. A spokesperson for the healthcare organization that administered the shots confirmed. You know, we've got anti-vaxxers and we've got individuals who are, have quote unquote conspiracy theories around the vaccine, and without going into it, I'm very clear on what a conspiracy theory is, and the bottom line is, we know the truth. It's just that the propaganda is louder than our own voices to speak out what's the truth. So here we go. The concept of a vaccine is to take a needle, which we've seen in societies what typically putting needles into people on the street away from an emergency room or doctor's office can do to people. And it's encouraging and easing into that process. But taking in a needle and putting it directly into the bloodstream of an individual, in this case, a child, whose bloodstream, we're all at a balance, a homeostasis balance of our body. And if you eat too much sugar, you're going to be off. If you're too alkaline, if you're too acidic, our bodies are very much in balance. So there's a lot of concern for a lot of reasons around this, not to mention, hello everybody, all the vaccines come from China. And if you don't think we're having problems with China, then we need to educate ourselves a little bit further there too. It would be one thing if all the vaccines were actually made here in the United States and transported directly to the location that's going to be able to disperse it. But no, they're not only made in China with different regulations that we have. If the government wants to walk through their plant, they have to give them 90 days notice, which anything can happen in those days. And then once they show up, they're often still not allowed on site. It's not a demand. It's still asking permission to see the process. And so we don't really know what's going on. We don't know who's doing it. We don't know what's being put into. But in addition to that, they're usually come over on shipping containers, not airplanes. And so they come over on these boats and wait in the ports. And there's a long time for those chemicals to mix and heat up and cool down. And there's a lot into that. And then we're going to inject those directly into our children. Some families understand that the health benefits outweigh any concerns that are unwarranted as they've been educated. And some families have realized that maybe vaccines are a good idea for people with already a better immune system, or people who are older and fully developed. So there's different criteria. But in this case, the families had not consented, and I don't know if they were opposed or they just hadn't been given the opportunity. However, these 3 students were injected with something at a school facility is the bottom line. So very scary. I know this happens quite a bit in California as well. I don't think the news covers it as much anymore because they're so worn. So once I saw this main article, I pulled that up. Okay, and now here's one as well. I recently just bought a car, and in California we don't have rain, but I had some meetings out of state, so I just drove it rather than flying. And I went up to Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Nevada. And while I was in Washington, we hit a rainstorm, which actually had rain in it, unlike California. So it was 4 days of downpour. Well, you know what? That wonderful factory installed sunroof that came with the titanium package, the highest level package, leaked in both the front A-frame and in the rear of the vehicle because the seals were not properly installed. So just a shout out. I know many of us have experienced ups and downs with YouTube, specifically this year, but I went on YouTube. I was able to find, not specifically this site in this instance, but I was able to find my specific car, find what the 2 problems were, and sealed up the various rubber seals, and it looks good to go. And now I just need to rain sometime in the next year to test it out. So there's a little bit of kudos to women's strength figuring out their own solutions, and a little shout out. I did change the valve gasket on my old car before I bought this new car, and that was also thanks to YouTube showing me what needed to be done, and that saved me an estimated $2,400. I think it ended up costing me, it was less than $30 for the valve gasket, and it did take about an hour and a half, but hey, worth my time. So these are the 2 sites I wanted to call your attention to. Now this is Valuetainment, and this gentleman, Patrick, he does a lot of interviews. He's very current on COVID issues and speaks to what's going on. And we've been really watching when our business is going to open, when our schools going to open to educate our children. You know, when are we going to have any semblance of life? As it's been constantly said by now the World Health Organization and also by the President of the United States, Trump, and I say that whole sentence together, that the way to get through this can't be worse than the actual disease or illness. And for so many of us, the financial devastation, the emotional fallout, the depression, the fighting, everything that streams from not having consistency and a paycheck is really unwinding society. And unfortunately, there was another post yesterday of how much the homeless population is growing. And again, it was linked to mental health issues and drug addiction. Well, you know what? If you don't have a paycheck for 6, 7, 8 months, we're going on and on and on, and EDD is not accepting applications because they closed for 2 weeks and are backlogged from that, or didn't pay you out for 6 months, I don't know how much savings an individual family or an individual themselves is supposed to have in order to cover an experience like this. We're always told in a perfect world, but when we've spent the last 10 years just trying to get by, how realistic has it been? So this gentleman, Patrick, looked at the difference between Disneyland and Disney World. They're both in Orange County, California, and Orange County, Florida, and he moves right on down the list. Disneyland in California closed on March 14th, and Disney World closed on March 15th. And then he names when Disney World opened, which was respectively mid-July, July 11th and July 15th for the different locations. California Disneyland, nope, not yet. So he also looked at the financial impact this is having, not only locally, which is in the billions of dollars. Disneyland, just by having a Disneyland in Orange County, all the vendors, all the hotels nearby, transportation, and then it's estimated that there's 78,000 jobs tied to Imagineering, live shows, Disneyland itself, just Disneyland in it. And then beyond the 78,000 would be the hotels and all of that revenue that they're posting. And whereas Disney World, we didn't have a billion-dollar revenue, but we did see that Florida expects about $700 million a year in taxes through Disney World. And so that gives an estimate when you calculate that out, how much revenue that is, but a direct impact on the local government that they're not receiving. So as he goes through and looks at the similarities, the one difference that he highlights is, hello, you got it, the governor. Governor Gavin Newsom has realized that it's more important to continue to shut down businesses and, well, yes, run by regulations versus in that county, the governor has decided that it's more important to be business friendly. Yes, be smart and safe, but be business friendly. It's not just for the business, it's for the sake of all those who live in the area, the citizens, the taxpayers. There needs to be a tax base. Once all this is ripped out in Disneyland, at what point can they come back? Now, if we step back a little bit further, Bob Iger, in my understanding, had been CEO of Disneyland for many, many, many years, however, probably decades. However, he stepped aside and moved into a chairman of the board role a few years ago, and he came on to Gavin Newsom's COVID task force. I don't remember the whole breadth of this, and quite honestly, it's not worth clicking on. But he was helping guide that, and even being right there on the task force with the governor still gave him the middle finger, and Igor ended up recusing himself from that committee and resigning, and stepped forward and announced at that point 28,000 job losses. Now they've already gone through many job losses and furloughs, but that's about what he'd come up to at that point, and he moved further, and apparently there's 78,000 jobs on the line there. very, very sad decisions. And as I said, I had to contact the governor's office this morning to see how my son is going to be able to be accepted back into school. And of course, nobody's there and nobody returns the phone calls. I'll also note that on the cell phones, you used to there'd be a contact us page and a phone number would come up and you could click on it. But uh, but there's been a change, and I'll see how many of you've noted this too. But if you click on contact us and it's a business, typically it'll still go right through. So you click call and it shifts over to the phone app that you have and it'll dial that number. But if you call Newsom's office, if you call Pelosi's office, if you call any of these government officials that are responsible for the shut-in or are getting probably a lot of angry calls right now, on their website, they have changed their phone number to a plus. So for instance, the area code might be 916 and then, the next 7 digits. But in between the 916 and the 7 digits, they put a plus. And so when you click on to call, it will not automatically call because that plus is in there. The cell phone app cannot place the call, and it just gives a beep, 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 wrong number. And this was done purposely to stop any kind of an automatic or robot call. But essentially, that's telling me that they're getting a lot of calls. They don't want to answer the phone, and they're coming up with a way to slow down the impact. So this again was Valuetainment. And this is Patrick going over Disneyland versus Disney World. Disney World is open. Disneyland is still shut down by the Grinch. Okay, and then there's one last here I wanted to go after. Now this is Farsight. We've had a lot of talk about YouTube specifically since October 15th when we had the Great Purge. And here, this gentleman's name is Courtney Brown. He's even stated that he's got to have some divine guidance for being able to continue what he's doing. But if you haven't already gone on this site, and I'm actually very interested, I've followed Courtney for many, many, many years. And in fact, many from the EOW crowd hasn't even heard of Courtney yet. So let me go over that really quickly for those of you who don't. Otherwise, if you do, this is just a ping reminder to go back to his site and check out this briefing and what he's got coming up for December. But so let me go back to anybody who needs that. This is Farsight. And Courtney Brown discussing the eternal life is absolutely inevitable for every living creature, and that it is impossible for this to change. Also, the near-term future plans for Farsight. Courtney Brown giving the Farsight Intelligent Briefing for October 2020. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this man. So, Courtney is a remote viewer. He very good friends with and is connected to many of the remote viewing names that you will know. In fact, he's got another interview coming up very soon with another remote viewing expert. So he's been very well known in that community. He was also, I believe he might still be, a college professor. But some years ago, he started Farsight. I can't remember what the original name was. It could have been Farsight Institute at that point, but it's evolved several times in the name, and site has shifted a little bit, which how he only has 56,000 subscribers surely shows shadow banning, because this is a huge loss from what he had. But anyways, so Courtney created this institute, and what they do is they train their own remote viewers to present the information in an entertaining fashion so that it can go out to the masses. Now, how did he do this? He looked around at the population and wanted to find out who he could train and invest his own time and money into with a specific population that would be more than likely to stay with him the long haul and turn whatever they learned into a business. So he selected a specific population who has typically been underrepresented, underhired, who hasn't had the same pathways. And he chose artists within that population, people who are very well spoken, extremely creative, very strong uh, fine art skills. And he took these skills and he added on the layer and the depth of being able to remote view. So he's proven that yes, anybody can learn this. And yes, there are some individuals with artistic backgrounds that can even take it farther in a way that the masses can start to assimilate it. So it's very thoughtful gentleman. And so what he's done is he releases human news, which is created the month before it happens. So his remote viewers will be tasked with seeing what a predominant headline will be in the upcoming 30 days, something that the whole world will recognize and be able to research. And then they go in and view what that might be, and then they sketch it out, and then they present that, and then you see during the month where in the world it happens. And they're usually very quite obvious. There isn't even it's very obvious when it happens. So what he also has his own Farsight Prime, which is his own platform, which, as we know, YouTube restricts. So he's able to go a lot more in depth on his own site and talk about subjects that are the lights are on, let's just call that. And over the years, Courtney's been really responsive, even with the level of followers that he has and his responsibility. He does not accept a paycheck through the Institute. He gives from his own paycheck and then takes any revenue that he gets from these to keep adding into the programs. But it's been very costly the way that he's been so dedicated in building out. And yet, each time I reach out to him on email, his responses back are fairly quick and very deep and honest. I'm very appreciative with what he's creating in this world. But his bottom line, and I don't want this to be missed over, is he's stating that we are endless beings. We live before this body and we'll live after this body. And he's saying nobody can take this away from you. So he's really standing up for humanity, and over the next year and a half, he's dedicated to coming at this from different angles to teach each of us who we are, where we came from, and what's really going on this planet. This isn't about a question anymore about, was there a crash at Roswell? Were there? No, we're beyond that. We are, how do we communicate with those outside of the vision that we normally see, or outside of what we're trained in school to be reality? We need to move up and beyond the propaganda and the agenda that we've bought into and step back into the world that we truly are connected to. So here we go. This was Courtney Brown Farsight Intelligence Briefing for October 2020. I suggest that on your watch list. I also would point you to Valuetainment, specifically this comparison, if you're in California, between Disneyland and Disney World, and how a governor's decision leads to shutdown. Now, as we know, shutdown now will have its ramifications in 2 to 3 years. So even though there's people unfortunately feeling the brunt immediately, it looks like by 2 to 3 years, the whole housing market is expected to crash, because people will be able to stay in their homes until it goes through the courts. And the courts are so impacted because they've been closed so long, it'll take a little while for landlords and mortgage holders such as banks to get to that point. And so that was an overview of today's update and news. And once again, this was episode 152 of Pink Glue. You can still find me on Twitter, direct message me at pink_glue. And I'm also making a leap into new platforms such as Clout Hub. So I'm very excited to explore that option as well. Again, that's CLOUTHUB. And this is October 30th, another day in California COVID Paradise. Happy Halloween!